I know there's like some like triple irony in what I'm about to ask because I'm a student journalist asking other journalists about how other journalists ask good questions as we're all trying to learn about how to ask good questions. But what do you guys think make good questions, just in general?
Um, I think what makes a good question is that it's tailored to the person you're talking to and that it's not I think it's really easy, at least for me, to think too far ahead and be like, okay, for this package, I want this sound bite, which is, real technical terms, but I really want this person to say this particular thing because it would sound good in my story. But that's a super selfish way to go about journalism for sure. And so I think that a good question is one that evokes a response and it evokes emotion and is open-ended, but is not too forward-leaning where that person feels like they're obligated to say something, and all of that doubles back down to just building trust with your source, whether it's a man on the street or someone you've been in contact with. It's just being like a human and being empathetic and like being able to see where that person is at.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the open-ended is definitely key. And also just not really in terms of framing the question, but I think something that has been important for me and something I try to remind myself is to not get tunnel vision when I'm doing an interview and, when I'm asking questions, because obviously, yes, you want to do your research, you want to have a list of questions that you're ready to ask, but you don't want to just be going from question one to question two to question three. If the person you're interviewing is saying something really interesting, you want to make sure that you're asking follow-up questions and that you're really making it feel more like a conversation, and which I think also helps them open up and they feel more comfortable because it doesn't feel like an interrogation or
Yeah.
something. So just, I think that's also something that I've tried to keep in mind is just how can I make this like a conversation, so that way I'm really finding interesting threads to go off of.
Well, and also it shows engagement in what they're saying in the present. And I think ironically, asking a question about what someone just said can help you ask the questions you really want to ask because you're creating more of a rapport. Like I was telling Grace, I had an episode with a bilingual journalist, a bilingual broadcaster on the podcast, and she was talking about how sometimes speaking to people in Spanish can help her get better sound bites. Whatever you can do to meet people where they're at, I think always creates just a better conversation and a better relationship. So it doesn't feel so like this.
Right, absolutely. Especially when you're reporting on political issues too, like specifically, it can get really easy to like get bogged down on like technical terms or like people are obviously very passionate about what they believe in and they can be stubborn, which we all are at times, but
Especially when
again,
we're
like
young.
yeah, like yes, exactly. So like meeting them where they are at, like being like, I understand why you feel that way. Let's go a little like push a little bit deeper into why like you're acting in this way or you're writing this bill or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd also just add in that with the technical terms and stuff, I think, working for NBC, I think you have to remind yourself that, we're reporting for a national audience. And so,
Hmm.
covering politics, there would sometimes be stories that, I thought would be interesting, or even like other reporters, on the political unit thought might be interesting. But you also have to think about the audience that, again, you have to think about why is the story important to a national audience? How do I make sure that I'm not using these jargon terms or terms that the average person doesn't know, that, you really have to think about your audience and make your reporting more audience centric, which again, I think it helps build that level of trust.
Do you think though it can be very easy to get not overstimulated, but feel like you don't have enough answers sometimes, and sometimes it has to be about gut, right? Because if you're just reporting on the Washington D.C., the city, you can have a great understanding of how the demographic is. But if you're doing national news, demographics, people's interests, they're all over the place. So do you think for both of you guys, whether it's on the producing side or the print side or the broadcast side, how do you like have that balance of like, well, I know people like this, but I also just have a hunch.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like also just there's some stories that are just, naturally important, or obviously, I don't think you can just fully go off of what the audience wants, right? Because, if there's an important political campaign or, if the White House, makes an important move, you know, those kind of stories, you're not really writing saying, okay, like, are people going to be interested
Yeah.
in this? I think, there's certain things that are just going to be inherently newsworthy. But yeah, I think it's just important to, be open to feedback and to be flexible and just, also realize when maybe something isn't worth covering because it's not the right audience fit.
Yeah, yeah. My experience before working with Hallie was, oh, sorry. Before working with Hallie was doing state politics for the state of Texas. And so, when I was working there, our thought was, okay, like I'm in Austin, why would someone in El Paso care about this kind of thing? And so this was a question I was asking from day one with Hallie because I was like, how do I go? Texas is a big state and that was hard. How do I go to a national audience? Why would someone in California care about something going on in South Carolina? Like it's just it can be hard, but something I really learned is that there are just universal human experiences and universal feelings. So, maybe you're telling a really specific story about um, a doctor in Georgia or something, and something happens, like if that doctor experienced trial and error, that is something every single human has experienced. And so telling the story from that angle and being like trying to really tug at that, I think can help loop people in, and it all makes us feel like a little bit closer as an audience. And just like as humans, I think it's just thinking about, okay, yeah, sure, like Dylan said, most of the news is this hard news that just matters because it's things happening to people. But when you're going that step deeper and like having to think about how you fill time for a broadcast, or fit want to do a feature story, I think about those like universal human feelings. What's the theme there? And then kind of work from that angle.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so you
Oh
go.
no. Yeah, no, I was just gonna chime in with that and say that one of the stories I did was about a special election in Virginia for a race in Congress because the former representative Jerry Connolly, passed away, and so Democrats, and because it's a deep blue seat, it's like whoever wins the Democratic primary is gonna win the special, and so I was assigned to cover that race. I pitched it. And at first, I was kind of having that thought of, okay, this is a district in Northern Virginia. It's deep blue. How can I get people to care about it? Why would someone, yeah, like back home in Texas want to read this article? And so what I realized when I'd interviewed the three main Democratic candidates running is that they all kind of had a similar kind of pitch to voters, that they were really making it a race about Trump. And I thought that was
Mm.
interesting to see and kind of explore more. Okay, why is Trump such a big factor in this race? And so it got into issues like the fired federal workers because it's Northern Virginia. And so there's a lot of like contractors, and stuff like that. I want to say there's over 50,000 in the district. So it's definitely one of the highest in the country. And so when I was able to kind of pull in some of these issues that get talked about in the press, like with Doge, the federal workers, just kind of general opposition to Trump, I realized that those were issues that obviously go way beyond just that Northern Virginia district. And so I think the article was able to reflect that. It also goes into the questions too, because I didn't fully know that going in. But then once you start asking those questions and you build that conversation, you realize like all these different, avenues that a story can go.
And it kind of feels like you can, like there are certain topics, the White House, whoever's in office, um, certain legislation, like on when it comes to hard news, sometimes the weather, there are certain things that people always care about, but a lot of the times, like you both were explaining, it's about the emotions that people want to elicit or want to know about. And that's what you're talking about. Like, someone in South Carolina could care about a trial and error story of a doctor in California if the right emotions are being played with, Grace.
Yeah, yeah. I think I don't know if y'all have read oh man, what's it called? It's a feature story, won a Pulitzer about the doctor who did brain surgery and the woman died on his table. I'll send you the link to the story. You can share it. It's fantastic. And it's used in like all of my classes here. And so I think that I took with me because yeah, it can be so overwhelming thinking about a national audience. It's like everyone in the United and sometimes a global audience. You know what I mean? So I think if you can try and make it as small feeling as possible, then that's ideal.